Good morning and welcome to Inside Jacksonville, a production of the UNF Department of Communication and CW17. I'm Sarah Van Zant.
And I'm Amel Kamel. We're here each month with stories about life on the First Coast.
As the name suggests, the First Coast was the first area in the United States settled by Europeans more than 400 years ago.
This month, we take a trip back in time to explore the rich history and heritage of Jacksonville and its surrounding areas.
We sometimes hear about silver linings in tragedies. How we bounce back can often reveal the true nature of a community. At the turn of the 20th century, one spark set off a disaster that would shape Jacksonville's future and test its resolve. Travis Crawford has the story.
Sky trains, skyscrapers, and sky boxes. A little more than a century ago, it may have seemed implausible the River City would reach such heights. But every high point comes from a low, and if you look closely, you'll find nestled amongst the hustle and the bustle, structures that stood witness to a city that rose from acres of ashes. At the turn of the 20th century, Jacksonville was booming. At 30,000 strong, it was the largest city in the state and a popular tourist destination. The city's chief export and natural resource was its surrounding lush pine woodlands. The St. Johns River offered a cheap and efficient way to ship the lumber.
It makes perfect sense that Jacksonville grew as a place that was built on wood.
Dr. Alan Bliss teaches history at the University of North Florida. According to him, wood, the resource that caused Jacksonville to grow so strong, also spelled its downfall.
But timber came to Jacksonville from all over northeast Florida and southeast Georgia. So it set the stage for rapid growth and easily achieved growth with limited construction technology and the skills for wood frame construction pretty easily available. It also made for an inflammable, rather incendiary nature to the city.
It started around lunch hour on May 3rd, 1901. A spark from a nearby stove fire blew into Cleveland Fiber Factory, which was located on the corner of Davis and Beaver Street behind me. That spark ignited piles of Spanish moss that were inside.
The factory employed a watchman whose sole job is to look out for fire, and it happened a lot.
Wyatt Taylor is the curator of the Jacksonville Fire Museum. He says small factory fires like these were common in urban areas back then. Usually the watchman would sound an alarm, and firefighters and factory workers would put out the fire as soon as it began. Still, due to the lack of fire safety at the time, Taylor surprised a large fire didn't happen sooner. On May 3rd, he said, an inevitable combination of natural conditions and plain bad luck caused the spark to grow into what it did.
So the watchman this particular day decides to go to lunch a little early before his replacement shows up because it's so calm. He figures if anything happens, they'll be able to put it out, no problem. Well, the wind picks up out of the west suddenly 20, 25 miles an hour, which is obviously a pretty stiff wind. And so just a few sparks that could have been handled very easily now become a very dangerous fire.
A very dangerous fire. With their technology of horse-drawn fire engine, firefighters simply couldn't keep up with the blaze, which grew to about 2 miles in width and moved from block to block at about 8 miles per hour, the speed of a brisk walk. 8 hours later, the fire was eventually quelled when it reached Hogan's Creek and St. Johns River. 10,000 people, 1/3 of the city's population, lost their home or business. Nearly 150 city blocks lay in smoldering shambles. Miraculously, only 7 people died. The thousands left after the smoke settled had a decision to make.
It would have been very simple to move on. There were other cities nearby with running water and all the comforts of home, but people of Jacksonville stayed. Even though they had lost literally everything they owned, they stayed to help rebuild the city by and large.
They had a little help. The down city brought all sorts of new workers in from surrounding cities and communities, as well as high-level architects to organize that labor. The most notable was Henry James Clutho, who helped create a new face for the city with his prairie style of architecture. And they didn't waste any time getting back to work.
Behind me is the Catherine Street Fire Station, now known as the Jacksonville Fire Museum. It was rebuilt 10 months after the Great Fire destroyed the original 1886 structure with salvaged bricks.
The first building permit was issued the Monday following the fire. A year later, citizens rebuilt the city to about 50% of its original size. 10 years later, it was a much larger city. The haphazardly constructed wooden villas replaced with steel frame technology born from the Industrial Revolution. Jacksonville grew rapidly during the last century, but there's a downside to that. Many of the buildings with such distinctive architecture that went up during the fire have since come down.
The city of Jacksonville, for whatever reason, doesn't tend to embrace its history like I wish it would, and a lot of others do as well. But today, I don't know that the fire defines Jacksonville anymore like it did, because we've lost a lot of Clutho's buildings.
It seems what we have left of the Great Fire is the memorials we erect and the stories we tell to remember the city that rose from acres of ashes. Travis Crawford, Inside Jacksonville.
Shortly after Jacksonville's Great Fire in 1901, innovations like motorized fire trucks and spring ladders dramatically improved firefighting. Today, the Jacksonville Fire Rescue Department has 54 stations with more than 1,200 uniformed personnel.
The Great Fire destroyed more than 2,300 buildings in Jacksonville, but some that survived continue to withstand the test of time. Among them, Florida's first hospital. Here's Andrew Huddleston.
Old St. Luke's Hospital is one of Jacksonville's oldest buildings, here on Palmetto Street, just a stone's throw away from the arena. For more than a century, the building has withstood disease, destruction, and disuse. In its early years, the hospital was a nursing school, but when the yellow fever epidemic struck in 1888, the students were put into service treating the sick and dying. Lauren Swain Mosley is the archivist for the Jacksonville Historical Society, which owns the building.
Also up here on the wall, we have this interesting letter that was written, sort of a very short memoir from Sharita Bouchalon. She was part of the first nursing class that started here at St. Luke's Hospital, and she describes in the letter people that she encountered during her first week and different deaths that occurred. Some of them were pretty horrific. She talks about different people being shot, things like that, who came into the hospital.
That was the hospital's first brush with death. The next was the turning point in Jacksonville's history, the Great Fire.
When the fire of 1901 started, it burned down almost all of the city. So most of the core of downtown burned down. So this is one of the few buildings that survived the Great Fire of 1901 that we still have in the city today.
The fire claimed over 2,000 other buildings and 7 lives. Old St. Luke's was spared simply because of its lucky location.
It was in part this creek right behind me which helped save the hospital from the Great Fire of 1901. The fire came right up to the edge of the creek but did not go over.
In 1914, a new hospital was built under the St. Luke's name, and this location ceased operations. Its 2 wings were eventually demolished, and the main building was slated for the wrecking ball. But it was saved when Florida Congressman Charles Bennett moved his office here in 1976. From there, it changed hands until the Historical Society bought it. They saw it as a good location to house their archives.
The archives used to be housed in the library at Jacksonville University, but we outgrew that space, so we had a lot of the archives stored in another location. And so when we were offered the opportunity to purchase this building, we did, and that way we were able to combine them both and have everything in one spot.
The Historical Society moved in early 2012. They spread their archives out through the 3-story hospital and the defunct Florida Casket Company building next door. Their collections focused on preserving the records of Jacksonville, both historical and contemporary. According to the Society, although they're focused on preserving the past, they're very much about enhancing Jacksonville's future.
I think history sort of forces you to be more forward-looking at the same time that you're looking towards the past. And I think it gives our life some extra meaning and context.
Andrew Huddleston, Inside Jacksonville.
Along with Old St. Luke's, the Jacksonville Historical Society has also completed several other major renovation projects, like the restoration of the Old St. Andrew's Church and the historic Merrill House, both originally built in the late 1800s.
It's witnessed almost 3 centuries of history, but is still considered young. This next story is about a gentle green giant on the city's south bank that dates back to the early roots of Jacksonville's history and heritage. You could call it Jacksonville's original citizen. The treaty oak has been here in what is now Jesse Ball DuPont Park for nearly 300 years. It's 70 feet tall, and its trunk is nearly 25 feet around. For the last 30 years, Early Piety has been taking care of this historic live oak.
I'm a tree surgeon, and I'm a certified arborist.
Piety says the treaty oak has seen a lot of history, up close and personal in its early years.
Well, I went over and looked in the dirt, and you wouldn't believe how much pottery I found. Indian pottery shards, pieces of pots and all that.
However, the most popular use was commercial. Curved live oak limbs make great ribs for old wooden ships. The USS Constitution got its name Old Ironside, because cannonballs bounced off it like it was made of iron. The ship was recently restored with live oak limbs from here in Jacksonville. The land Treaty Oak sits on was bought by Jessie Ball DuPont back when the tree was threatened by development. She sold it to the city for $1, provided that the city kept it as a park for eternity. The city spent $200,000 in renovations that included landscaping and lightning protection. Piety designed and built a less invasive boardwalk that would not harm the root system.
So if you will imagine the root system of the tree as a spoke of a wheel, if you was to go across there and cut it, well, that would be cutting the roots, but if you poke holes in it, you don't hardly do any root damage at all. So the tree virtually doesn't think we're here at all. It went right through the root system. The tree never knew it happened.
This new boardwalk accommodates visitors daily. People know this is a special place in town.
You wouldn't believe how many weddings are held under this tree. Also, there's a lot of people buried here. It's kind of a rite of passage to bring your grandchild down here and let him climb on the treaty oak. Although we discourage people climbing on it, it happens. And, you know, as long as it stays low-key like that, that's not going to hurt the tree.
Mike Robinson is a retired JEA forester and says the tree is spreading its roots throughout Jacksonville in another way. He's a volunteer with Greenscapes, a group that plants, protects, and promotes trees.
We collected seed from that every December through January is when that tree drops its seed. And we'd go down and gather the acorns of it, and you'd sort through those. Some weevils got in some, and would grow treaty oak babies.
Can you believe live oaks can live up to 600 years old?
Wow, so I guess Treaty Oak may have another 300 years. Mm-hmm. Still to come inside Jacksonville, the mystery over a historic fort that has sparked a recent controversy among the area's historical community.
Also, see which First Coast city is now the North American home port to one of the world's most impressive 16th century Spanish replica ships. Stick around.
Turning a 20-foot wall into a canvas takes vision. So will getting into college. I've got what it takes. So do you.
Looking for these? You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving.
The First Coast is truly a treasure trove of history, especially for French and Spanish exploration.
About 4 years ago, a nonprofit foundation in Spain wanted to spread the knowledge of its maritime history. Charlie Kane has the story of a recreation of a piece of that history on Matanzas Bay.
A variety of boats dock in the Matanzas Bay in St. Augustine. This one stands taller than the rest. Its name is El Galeon, an authentic wooden replica of a 16th century galleon. Galleons were trade ships sailing in the 16th and 17th centuries. Ulysses Custodio is the ship's head of logistics. He says St. Augustine is a perfect home for El Galeon.
We fit right into the city and its history because, well, Pedro Menendez came on a ship pretty much like this one, and the city has a very strong Spanish roots, and I think it's a good thing for the city.
Menendez crossed this body of water, the Matanzas Bay, in 1565 in a voyage from Spain to Florida. He's not only the founder of St. Augustine, but Florida's first governor as well. Tourists who visit this 170-foot recreation can speak with crew members to learn the history linking Spain and Florida. Crew members actually live on the ship. Guillermo Munoz is one of them.
I like to share with the people that come to visit us my experience sailing here and how do we live on board, because we live on board and people can't believe it, you know.
More than 100 members lived on the galleons in the 15 and 1600s. Some of them were forced to sleep on cannons on the main deck of the ship. Cannons just like these.
Everything, the forecastle, the noble area, the gun deck, the holds, everything is where it should be.
Even the furniture. This is where the captain and his first officers would meet, right here in the noble area.
I think the noble area it's pretty interesting because of the luxury comparing with how all the crew slept on board.
A tour takes visitors below deck, inside of the ship. On display are 2 maps of North America from that period. This one, drawn in 1584, is one of the first maps to feature detailed information about the southeastern United States. This floor also contains additional ship parts identical to those in the 16th century galleons. Tourists can also see a video on the history of the craftsmanship of Spanish galleons. Next year is the 450th anniversary of the founding of St. Augustine, and ships such as Pedro Menendez's galleon are largely responsible for bringing those explorers here. Charlie Kane, inside Jacksonville.
Along with its sister ship, now Victoria, El Galleon will represent St. Augustine's Spanish heritage next year during the city's 450th birthday.
Not everything in the nation's history generates pride, but it's important that we remember nonetheless. Florida's oldest standing plantation house is located here in Jacksonville. Myra Souza has the story.
Kingsley Plantation, famous for its historical buildings that were built by many slaves, became part of the National Park Service 26 years ago.
Where we're at now, Kingsley Plantation, was once before we took ownership of the plantation, was actually a Florida state park, and there were Florida Park Service rangers here before we got here.
This year, Kingsley Plantation celebrates its 17th annual Kingsley Heritage Celebration. According to Lode Holtz, every year, historians reenact some of the activities that slaves would have done on a daily basis.
Zephaniah Kingsley was the owner here, and today we're portraying 1814, which would have been the end of the Patriots' Rebellion War, which actually had some significance for Kingsley because some of his plantations around Jacksonville were attacked during this war.
Originally, there were 32 slave cabins, but only 23 still remain. The slave cabins were built during 1820 out of tabby, a combination of oyster shells, sand, and water. The cabins form a semicircle, a pattern used in the villages of West Africa. Sherry Dupree is a director of an anti-slave trade organization in Gainesville. She has visited Kingsley Plantation several times with groups. She says each time is a different experience.
What was so fabulous to us were the tabby houses, and yet we still can see the frames of those homes today where the slaves lived. And we spent a lot of time looking at the material that it was made out of and how it was structured, how small they were, and how many people had to live in just one little house. That was just exciting to us, and how close they were built together and how they were all in one little area.
The main house is another important place at the plantation. Park Ranger Emily Palmer says Zephaniah Kingsley and his African wife, Anna, moved to this plantation 200 years ago. It is the oldest plantation home still standing in Florida.
Outbuildings had burned down during the Patriot War. The main house survived because they stole all the hardware from it. So every doorknob, every hinge was gone, but its house stood.
But the main house isn't really where the park rangers tell the Kingsley story. Parker says the kitchen house and the slave cabins usually attract the most attention from visitors.
Today, as a testament to their life, is the archaeology and the buildings that they lived in, the places they called home, the rooms that they were born in, people died in. And so that's really our contribution to the American story.
After years of start and stop planning, the National Park Service intends to give thousands of visitors a water taxi service.
So a boat tour would afford an opportunity to see more of the actual preserve and some of the islands that are along the intercoastal waterway.
King says the boat tour will reduce the number of cars on the road. For now, the best way to get to Kingsley Plantation is through Palmetto Avenue. The Seymour Regional Road, made of sand and oyster shells, where many slaves traveled each and every day to and from the fields. Mayra Souza, inside Jacksonville.
After Kingsley died, Anna moved with former slaves to the Arlington area where she lived her remaining years.
Still ahead inside Jacksonville, historians know it was built nearly 450 years ago.
But recent discoveries have many questioning the true location of a significant piece of Florida history. That's next.
"7,000 high school students drop out every school day. That's a line of desks more than 4 miles long. We can keep students in school. Visit boostup.org and take the first step."
Is that thing getting closer? Look how high that thing's going. Look out there, look at the debris.
Give me the camera.
No, just drive, I've got it.
Zoom in, zoom in.
I can't believe this is happening.
Oh, the size of that thing.
It's everywhere.
Are you getting this?
Yeah, I've got it.
What was that? It's the National Guard.
How'd they get here so fast?
I don't know.
Pull over, pull over.
Do you have what it takes to head into the heart of the storm? Check out NationalGuard.com.
Welcome to my block party. Glad you can make it.
The only triple doubles you get come with fries.
Last time you blocked someone, you were online.
I can do this all day. Your moves are just gay.
Using gay to mean dumb or stupid, not cool.
Not cool.
Not in my house, not anywhere. It's not creative, it's offensive to gay people. And you're better than that.
Global warming is a problem.
Problem.
It's a problem.
I wanted to do something to become more energy efficient.
To protect the environment.
To protect the future.
So I turned to Energy Star for help.
Energy Star is helping me be part of the solution.
Everyone can join the fight against global warming. Go to EnergyStar.gov to learn what you can do.
Together.
Together?
Together, we can all make a difference.
Jacksonville's Fort Caroline area got its name from the historic French settlement built there 450 years ago, settled even before St. Augustine. At least that's what the history books say.
Two researchers recently sparked a hot debate among historians by claiming the history books are wrong. Andy Leverett has the story.
The Timucuan Ecological and Historic Preserve in Jacksonville is a site of beauty, history, and majesty. Jeffrey Johnson is a park ranger here.
This 46,000 acre behemoth that is the Timucuan Ecological and Historic Preserve, which it's interesting, it's the only ecological and historic preserve in the National Park Service system. So it's a very unique place.
Within the bounds of the preserve lies the Fort Caroline National Memorial. This year was the 450th anniversary of the fort's founding, but the historical accuracy of the fort's location is being called into question. No archaeological evidence has been found near Fort Caroline's memorial to prove that the original fort existed there or even nearby.
We can't say for sure where the exact fort is, and so it sort of has sparked this debate over, why did the National Park Service choose to put the fort exhibit where it's at?
People have actually been searching for the ancient Fort Caroline since 1858. In February, two researchers challenged the assumption that it could be found in Jacksonville. Dr. Fletcher Crow from Florida State University and Dr. Anita Spring from the University of Florida claimed that they have new evidence showing where the fort really was. They claim their analysis of early colonial era maps, linguistic analysis, and other factors show the fort was actually located near the mouth of the Altamaha River in southeast Georgia, 70 miles north of here.
The history is not lost, just the location is lost, which, when you really think about it, which is more important.
Some scholars disagree with Crow and Spring's new claims. Dr. Keith Ashley is the coordinator of archaeological research at the University of North Florida.
I still strongly believe that it's on the St. Johns River. It very well may be in the marsh area. So I think it's in the general vicinity.
Spring from the University of Florida intends to back her claims with archaeological evidence. In an email she stated, "Going forward, we will be interested in having well-credentialed and experienced archaeologists to work with us on the project."
I'm interested in reading, the report on the archaeology that they do out there and kind of like to see what they find.
Ashley believes that if the fort was found in Georgia, it would rock the historic community of Jacksonville.
It would really change things dramatically. I mean, it's been a long-standing belief that it's on the St. Johns River.
Dr. Alan Bliss is a history professor at UNF. He questions the new claims as well. His questions revolve around the historic attack on Fort Caroline, where Spaniards marched by land from St. Augustine all the way to Fort Caroline. Historic documents show us that Pedro Menendez and his troops made this march to Fort Caroline, attacked it, and returned victoriously in 12 days or less.
The assertion that Fort Caroline's true location actually lay some 70-odd miles to the north, near Darien, Georgia, makes that time lag more problematic. It just seems quite a bit less likely that he would have been able to accomplish all that and cover that imposing amount of geography.
Crow and Spring counter by saying the Spanish actually marched from a camp on the St. Mary's River in Georgia, following trails made by Native Americans. Despite his doubts, Bliss is excited about the controversial new research.
Professionally, this means there is lots of honest work left to be done for historians.
Scholars have many questions to answer regarding Fort Caroline, but one thing is certain: the search to find the mysterious fort is far from over. Andy Leverett, Inside Jacksonville.
Andy adds there's one thing all of the historians and researchers do agree on. Not one bit of archaeological evidence can support any location, at least not yet.
That's a wrap for today's Inside Jacksonville. But be sure to join us next month when we travel the other direction on the timeline and explore new technologies and their impact on our city's future.
If you missed anything from today's program, just click through to our website. Go to unfmedia.com and click on Inside Jacksonville. You'll find expanded versions of our stories, photos, interviews, and other extras.
Thank you for joining us this Sunday morning.
We'll see you next time, Inside Jacksonville.